Hey, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can make this. When the blue ball moves around with my mouse and gets too close to the white one disappears and then comes back. So there are a couple things that are interesting in this video, but the main thing is like, how can we get a collision to be recognized between this thing that's stuck in the middle and the thing that's moving around? So I'll try and show that in this video, and we'll start from scratch. Okay, so just the first thing is we need some circles. So I'll just type circle. If I hold down Control, I can get two to show up by clicking twice. I've got two circles, and I think I want them both to go to a composite so they can both show up on the screen at once. So I'll click composite. I'll highlight them both and hold down Control while I connect, and that will connect them both at once. Let me also just highlight them both and make them smaller down to like 0.1. And I want the resolution to be parent panel size just so that it's not 256 by 256. That's the default. This one should be blue, so I'm just going to change its fill color to like blue. And this should be it. The next thing is, can I get the mouse to move it around? And so I will add a mouse in chop, and I will make that go out to a null because that's how we do things. And then viewer active, drag it over to the circle. You know, actually changing the center of the circle, I think is an issue. I think what I really want to do is add a transform. If nothing else, it's going to be more explicit what I'm doing, but I think it actually causes a problem if I do it directly. So let's have this be the transform X and Y. Translate. So that seems to be moving around with the mouse. Of course, the output doesn't look right, and that's because the operation here is multiply. So it only shows the parts where the two balls overlap. So let's change that to over. And now it's working, but the blue one is underneath. If I cared, I could just click swap order operation order. That's working. Okay, so I've got two balls moving around. First, let's just make sure this even works. If I go to perform mode, I get nothing because I need to make an out here. Let's try that again. Okay, so it seems to be working, but it's not really following my mouse cursor. And I think what's happening is the mouse cursor, if we look at the values, they go from 1 over here to -1 over here. And the transform, we probably want to go from -0.5 to 0.5. So it looks like they're twice as big as they should be. So I should be able to just go over here where the value is from the operator and just do divided by 2. Let's see if that works. It seems to be working for the X, but for the Y, not so much. And that's because that translation from -0.5 to 0.5 and -1 to +1, that's correct for this direction, and it would be correct for the other direction if this were a square, but it's not. There's an aspect ratio to the screen, and this direction is smaller than this direction by some amount. That's the aspect ratio. So what we need is to know what the aspect ratio is. I made another video that shows how you can find the aspect ratio, but I'm just going to spoiler alert, I'm just going to tell you. So instead of just dividing it by 2, we also need to multiply it times the aspect ratio, which we can do with one of the Python helper classes, which is monitors.primary.width divided by monitors.primary.height. I'll put it in parentheses. That is the aspect ratio, width divided by height, right? So, of course, this assumes that we're showing it at full screen, at full resolution of the monitor, but I think that's what I want to do. So let me just try that again. I will click on perform mode. And now it seems to be following my mouse. Of course, I also in perform mode don't want the title bar to show up. So let me go to the root of the project and click on perform. And then over here, I can change borders to off. And I think that's it. I do want the opening size to be fill. I think otherwise we're okay. So I'm going to go back into the project now. Okay, so that's all working. Now, of course, I need this to disappear. I think what I want is probably to change the alpha of the circle. So if I change the fill alpha, that's an easy way to make it disappear. And it would be nice if it kind of faded out instead of just disappearing, going 1 to 0 instantly. Luckily, the trigger chop can make our number go from 0 to 1 and 1 to 0 with an ADSR envelope or curve to it, so we can get a fading out kind of thing. Let's just try it right now. If I take this trigger and make it go out to a null, and then make that the alpha. Okay, so it's gone because the trigger is 0, but if I go over here and just trigger this with a push, you can see it fades in and fades out. There's a little bit of a weirdness, like it stutters, and actually if I hold it down, you'll see why. There's a period where it just stays at 0.5. So let's look in here. I think that's the sustain level, so I probably want that to be 1. And we can play around with the animation later, but I think if I do it now, it stays at 1, and then when I let go, it fades back down. So that seems okay. So the next thing is, how can we trigger this based on where my blue ball is? The way that we find what we want to know is, let me just temporarily change this back to 1. Okay, so what I want is to know when the blue ball is there, or there, or there. So what I'm looking for is to see what the distance is between the center of the blue ball to the center of the white ball. Whatever that number is, it's, at this point, it could be like some number, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. When it gets to the size of these balls, which is 0.2, right? Because the radius is 0.1. So when it gets to 0.2, it will be touching, and anything less than 0.2 means that it's overlapping. So if the distance between the centers of these two balls is less than 0.2, I think that means we want the one inside to disappear. I think that's the logic. So how do we find that? There is a formula. If these two were moving around, both of them were moving around, the formula is a little more complicated, but I think the formula is a lot easier because the one in the middle is always at 0, 0. So let's just try and find the formula. Formula to find the distance between 2 points. Let's see. Okay, so the formula is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And x2 and y2 are the coordinates of our blue ball, let's say, and then x1, y1 are the coordinates of the white one. So this becomes a lot easier when we consider that x1, y1 are always 0. So x2 minus 0 squared, that's just x2 squared. So all we need is the x of the blue ball squared plus the y of the blue ball squared, and then get the square root of all of that. So let's see if we can make that formula. There is an expression dat that allows you to do more complex math than the math dat will, chops. We're talking chops. Envelope expression chop allows you to do more complex things than the math chop does. So let's try that. The expression that we're looking for is the inputs. Let's get some inputs to this. So that's just the mouse, right? Let's do this. We'll take mouse X and is that it? No, let's drag. I guess we need to drag the output of this to the input of that. Let's try that. Okay, so that's the tx and ty. We're going to deal with those. And let's see, how do we get the values there? So I think we want, this example shows like whatever the input values are, that's what comes out of this. So that's what we're seeing. Let's see if we can get just the tx, for example. So I think it's inputs and then tx. Does that work? No. Inputs, the first set of inputs, and then tx out of that. So that seems to work. Okay, and then, channels, limited output channels, we want to just limit it to 1. So we're getting just the tx back, I think. Yeah, so that's what's going to come out of the express 1 chop. Okay, we don't want that though. We want that squared. That's how we do that in Python, **2. So that, it looks like, sure, I guess that's the x value squared. It's moving around. And then, so we want to add that to me.inputs 0. Let's make this a little bigger. The TY channel squared. Hit tab and just see if that happens. Like as I move around, I don't know. Seems like that could be the number we need. We'll see. And of course, this whole thing has to get square rooted. So we would just put it all in parentheses. And on the outside, we'll do math.square root. Where am I getting all this from? Well, *2 is just how you get something to the power of 2. That's just Python. And math.square root is Python as well. Let's look at the Python help here. This is specifically for expression chop, but let's look at the Python class reference. There are standard Python modules that get installed like math. So math.square root will be listed here somewhere. There's all kinds of math functions that we can access in TouchDesigner. There's math.square root. So that's what we're using for that. Then, you know, like the actual *2, that's just like an operator. That's part of Python. We could find that out easily. ChatGPT could help us with that. But, and of course, like this part is a little tricky. We do want to actually look at the help for expression. And there are some examples here, but that's probably the best way to approach this. So we can start to see how we can access what's coming in. And that's how I got to just like me.inputs. Let's see where inputs is. Inputs. It's a list of input operators. So this is the list and then the first thing from the list. And then from that, we get these two channels, TX and TY. So that's how we're picking those out. So anyway, this looks like it's probably the distance from the center of the blue ball to the center of the whole canvas, which is also the center of the white ball. So let's see if that does it. Now, what we really want is for this not to be a number. We want this to be a true or false. And so what I can do is if that is greater than 0.2. So it turns to 1 greater than, let's see, let's try this out. How can we, well, let's just connect it to the trigger. Let's see what happens. Let's see if this works. So when I'm out here, it is sending a 1 to the trigger. When I get here, no, that doesn't seem to work. Doesn't seem to work. Let's try it. Let's see what's going on. So I do see, oh, because I disconnected this, right? So let's reconnect this to the alpha. Let's see what happens now. So when I move around, it doesn't seem to be working. Oh, it seems to work when the cursor gets to, or the center of the blue one gets to the edge. So maybe all I need to do is just, you know, do twice the distance. So let me try that again. Gonna go over here to expression, and instead of getting a value that is 1 or 0, depending on if this expression is true or false, when it's greater than 0.2, I'll do greater than 0.4. And I think this is going to work. So I'm moving, and as I get close, it disappears. So this is working. Let's just see what it looks like here. So as I come closer, it does go away. Okay, so this is looking good. And then we can see what's happening, right? Like the expression here is 1 because that distance value is greater than 0.4. So it's 1 all the time. But if I get it to where that becomes less than 0.4, then the value turns to 0, which in turn triggers the trigger, which then causes it to go through its ADSR envelope and change the circle's opacity. So it's a lot of logic there, but this is a way that we essentially are doing an if-then statement, like we would see in other programming languages. If this is true, then it'll output a 1. If it's false, it'll output a 0. What I can do is bypass the trigger. So that means the number that comes across, well, look, that works fine, but it just goes 0 to 1 instantly. So that's what the trigger is doing for us. It's giving us that envelope to make this kind of fade out and fade in. So that's where the trigger is useful. Also, if I go in here and change this so that it's not outputting a 1 or 0, depending on whether this expression is true or false, but I just tell it to output the value, well, look, the value actually is changing the opacity. So when I'm really far away, it's fully opaque, but then as I get closer, it gets less and less opaque. So I don't know. I mean, I guess that's some other project, I guess. But you can see how we can detect collisions, which was our aim by just having this trigger when we get the right when we get the distance between these 2 points being less than the right amount. So I hope that helps. Good luck.